I thought it was really go.
All right. And we're live, everyone. Hadar, you want to take it away?
Great. Thanks so much, Danielle. Hi, my name is Hadar Harris, and I'm the Executive Director of the Student Press Law Center, and we're very grateful to have you all here today to talk with us about advisors at risk. As you may know, the Student Press Law Center works to defend and support the free press rights of high school and college journalists throughout the United States. We fight censorship and help to promote good journalism. We have a legal hotline where we answer questions and provide assistance on all kinds of legal issues that can arise for student journalists and for the advisors who support them. And this time of year, we hear more and more from advisors and from students who are under threat or at risk on some level because of the work that they've done over the school year, the pieces that they published, and pressure that's coming to them from the administration. And so as we explore a variety of different issues in these kinds of webinars over the course of the year, we thought it was very, very important to go into depth about what we can do collectively to support advisors at risk and to support those advisors who support student journalism. Having this webinar right now during Teacher Appreciation Week throughout the United States is a perfect time to talk about the roles that advisors and teachers play in helping to support student journalists. So what happens when those same teachers are threatened or demoted or reassigned or even fired because of the work that they're doing? Today, we're going to talk about what you can do to help your advisor, or if you are an advisor, places that you can go to, and things that you can do to protect yourself and your job. So we're going to start by hearing the story of a case of retaliation in California where students stood up to defend their teacher. And then we're going to be joined by a superstar roundtable to discuss how to respond to advisor retaliation. First, we're going to be joined by students who've led the charge to defend their advisor at San Juan High School. Olivia Fu and Sam Newman are the co-editors of The Express, the student newspaper on campus. And I want to thank them for joining us. Hi, everybody. And we want to give you a chance to talk a little bit about what happened at your school and what you did. So take it away.
All right. Hi, my name is Olivia.
I'm Sam.
We're the co-editors-in-chief of the Express newspaper in San Juan Hills, Capistrano. So what had happened to us was in early March, we published a print edition in which the center spread dealt with sex and relationships in high school. We had, I think, 5 features on different anonymous students and their experiences, and then a couple of opinion pieces that went along with it.
Yeah, and basically the 5 center spread pieces focused on different sexual experiences for 5 different anonymous students. Some of them were the stories of being in the LGBT community. Others were experiences with kind of like the gray area of consent, and others were talking about abstinence. And then we had 2 opinion pieces talking about the harmful culture of slut shaming and about kind of like the myths of virginity.
Yeah, and then we published the print edition on a Monday. That night, we started receiving texts from friends that like one of the local Facebook groups of like the moms that go to our school and live in this area, that some of the kids had brought home the print edition and they had taken like pictures of the headlines and posted it on Facebook. And then the parents were going off on saying how it was inappropriate, how it was sensationalistic, and how like disgusted they were. We expected to have a response. Like at that point, we weren't too concerned because it was just the parents. And in the past, we'd dealt with controversial issues and didn't have like that severe consequences. But then the next day at school, it was like a Tuesday morning, our advisor texted us that he was getting called to the district about the newspaper and that he was told not to show up at class. So that's when we started to get concerned because it seemed like he was getting in trouble or that we were actually getting in trouble when we knew that we didn't break anything free speech.
And then it was that afternoon that our principal sent an email to all of the parents at our school. It wasn't sent to the students, unfortunately, and it was basically just condemning our whole entire publication, and not just the center spread, and basically saying how we crossed standards of like good journalism in English, and basically just like condemning our whole paper.
Yeah, I mean, she cited some district board policies, like that Sam said, that we didn't like uphold any standards of journalism. She called like our writing like disgusting, like sensationalistic. She said that the fate of the advisor was undetermined at the time in the last sentence. And again, she had not spoken to us about it. We went in that day multiple times after our advisor texted us like, oh, maybe we texted him, should we contact the Student Press Law Center? And he was like, maybe. And that was the last we'd heard from him after he was called over to the district. So we had tried to make several meetings with her that day and we were not able to, but yet we saw her making appointments with like parents who were complaining. Like I actually saw her talking to a parent that was angrily waving the paper and like holding up Facebook on his phone, but she wouldn't speak to us. So then that evening we went over to Sam's house, our entire editorial board, and we wrote an email response. Oh, well, we put the stories online because we thought that maybe a bunch of the negative reactions were because the parents hadn't actually read the stories, they just read headlines. So we put the stories online, and then we all got together and we drafted like an email response to the principal, which we emailed her, and then we also published online, in which we cited how what we did didn't violate California Education Code 48907, how our advisor hadn't done anything wrong, and that it was unfair that he was like removed from the classroom. Basically defended our position and said how hurtful it was and how damaging it was for her to have publicly condemned our newspaper in that way. And then
we also, a couple of our people from our editorial board and a few just like students from our school, there was a district meeting discussing like action that should be taken like concerning the issue. And a few of our people spoke and were just saying how basically she was making accusations about our like free speech and like what we can and can't say as a school newspaper, and how our advisor should be punished even though it's a student-run publication, so any like ramifications would be held to us, and how they were saying it was sensationalistic and how it broke free speech even though we didn't do anything libelous or slanderous or promote any danger.
Yeah. And that was like the board meeting. The district board meeting was the Wednesday after it was published. It was also that was when we found out that our advisor had officially been put on administrative leave, and he was not allowed to communicate with us or anyone at the school. It was around that time. The next day was that was when we published more. We reached out to the subjects who we'd written about for the feature section of that Stoner SPED and like their responses. We'd received a lot of positive responses from parents in the community after like all the negative backlash, which the principal was not replying to the positive ones, only the negative emails. So we put those out there for other people to show how like that there was support for our paper. And around this time, the ACLU SoCal, they reached out to us and like offered to help with like advocate for us and make sure that like we did things on like correct legal grounds and stuff.
Yeah, and it was also important for us because we obviously lacked an advisor because he was removed from the classroom. We did have like substitute teachers, but they weren't like with a journalism background, so they weren't much of a help. But I think it was really important for us as co-editors and for our editorial board to just focus on putting out more content explaining why we like published our content and why our center spread like felt they needed to say like their stories and stuff like that. It was really important to just like share our opinions because a lot of the social media attention was kind of negative and didn't really show the whole story.
Yeah. So, and like in our email to the principal, which we published, like the three things that we asked were, the three things we asked would be like, oh, that our advisor not be put on administrative leave, like that he don't be punished. We want him back into the classroom. We asked that like the board like reviews policies dealing with student journalism, and then we asked that the principal would like send another statement out to all the people who received her original statement about how we did conform to the standards of good journalism, that we hadn't like violated any codes or anything. And we're like still waiting to see how that ends up turning out.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. There was other things that had happened like during the period. Our advisor was on administrative leave for a week, and then the investigation against him closed about a month after.
Yeah.
Like it closed like 2 weeks ago, and it happened in March. But something that else that happened, like other news media had picked up like our story and wrote like negative opinion pieces in which like the communications director for the district trashed us. But that's our story
so far. We're still
at this point.
And so where does it stand right now? So it stands right now that the advisor's still on leave.
No,
he's
our
back
advisor
on.
is
back.
the investigation against him
Whoops.
is closed, and we're just waiting with
I'm
to
frozen.
hear like more like policy from like maybe the district and keep talking with them.
Great. So it's been a pretty fun time for you all.
Exciting.
Yeah, different types of fun.
An exciting time. Well, thank you for laying out this story because, you know, we were, well, let me ask you one question. So how did the ACLU know to get involved and how did the media know to get involved, the external media?
So the ACLU, a like parent in the community or something, had a contact and reached out to them, and then they commented on one of the email that we had published. They commented on like, hey, like this is my email address. I worked for the local like ACLU. Reach out to me if you guys want help. So then we immediately called him, and that's how we got started for there.
And then the other site that wrote kind of like a negative opinion about our publication, I'm not sure like where they, I'm not sure like who like told them about it or if they were like a local community member, but they did talk to, who was it that they cited?
The communications director at the district.
Yeah, was like
Got it.
cited in their piece, which, I mean, yeah, it's a little
Moved it up. So, I mean, you know, it sounds like you had a lot of moving pieces, but you also really took advantage of, you know, community connections, making sure that you got your message out, even when kind of the administrators were trying to kind of frame the narrative around what was happening, even without engaging you, making sure that you were finding your allies to be able to kind of push forward and support your advisor and support your ability to publish what you published, and putting out more positive content around the negative content, right? So there were lots of pieces that you did, and we really want to hold up kind of the example of what you did to, and took it with your editorial board, and you all really took the lead in this. I'm sure that there were moments where you were like, oh my God, like we don't have an advisor, what's happening here, right? Did you guys have some freaking out moments?
I mean, we had like a 5-hour panic session at Sam's house when we were drafted that. We all had to like calm down, focus.
Yeah, and then when we first had published the stories online, right when we received the email from our principal, we like kind of like we actually depublished the stories for, I think it was like a really brief time. It was like 20 minutes, half an hour, and then we were like, wait, that's actually so wrong of us. Like we can't censor ourselves like by her indirectly doing that. Mm-hmm. So then that's where we like found our like footing, and I think that was the last time we really were like unsure.
Right.
Well, good for you all. I think you've done a great job, and we're really glad that you're able to tell this story. You know, one of the things that is really important in these kinds of cases is both having the students take the lead as you did, but then also identifying where the other resources are for help. So at this point, with that beautiful segue, I want to invite Lori Keekley and Chris Evans and Mike Hiestand back on screen. I want to thank Olivia and Sam for telling the story. We may call you back in if we have some more moments, but thank you very much for now. As I mentioned a minute ago, we have a superstar roundtable of folks who are with us to talk about where some of the places are to go and what you can do as an advisor and also as a student to support advisors who find themselves in difficult positions. Chris Evans is the student media advisor at the University of Vermont and is the president of the College Media Association. Lori Keekley is a journalism teacher at St. Louis Park High School in Minnesota, and she is the head of the Journalism Education Association's Scholastic Press Rights Committee. And Mike Hiestand is the senior legal counsel here at the Student Press Law Center. The three of them have been working on these issues of helping advise advisors and advise students who find themselves under pressure for quite a while. And so we're so grateful that you all have made the time to join us and lend your expertise to this conversation. We're going to have a little roundtable here. And I guess we should start out with what are kind of the most, how can an advisor tell maybe when they're being retaliated against or that there's some bad thing happening to them on the basis of work that the students have done? because it takes different formats, right? It could be this kind of extreme reaction that we've just heard about, but it could be that they're reassigned and are no longer going to be the advisor, or it could be that they cut the program completely. We've seen a lot of different examples of that. Does somebody want to take that first? How do you know when you're being retaliated against? Lori.
I can start.
You opened your mouth so I could see.
And I'm happy to start. One of the ways that they do retaliate sometimes is to take the advisor away from the program. And honestly, one of the ways to kind of fight back against that would be through certification. I know JEA has both CJE and MJE certification that advisors can do. They can prove that they know what they're talking about. And then the parents, hopefully getting parents involved and students involved in that as well, can help fight that stem of the administration. Additionally, they can cancel classes. One of the beautiful items of, especially with electronic, I think a lot of schools now do the electronic enrollment. You can get numbers very easily for that. So if you have 35 students in your class coming in, but they're canceling it, that's a great information for the students to find out, and then their parents to find out, and then they can go to other people, starting with the administration, and ask why that is the case when there are other classes that might run at 25. So really just making sure you have the facts behind you and you have some proof that you know what you're doing, I think can help push back against that administrative retaliation. And really getting the students involved is very, very important.
Yeah, we're going to go back to that in just a second. Chris, do you have any perspective from the college?
Sure. I mean, I think when I think of the question, just along the lines of how do you know, it's when you get that first phone call and they say, you know, the president of the college is suddenly on the phone saying, can we just have a conversation about this story? And that usually means they want, well, usually it sometimes means that they want the advisor to have a conversation with the students. They treat the advisor like the adult in the room and the students like children, which is really insulting for people who are 18 to 25 years old. And then they'll put the pressure on advisors. You'll sometimes have advisors who will have content for the newspaper or the news product, whatever it is, be tied to performance evaluations. And in those cases, if a comma is out of place, they say, well, that's good enough reason to remove the advisor from their position. It's unfortunately not too common. It is more likely to happen at a private institution because there's no guarantee of First Amendment freedoms there, but it certainly does happen as well at public institutions. And we see it far too often. We have a whole committee at College Media Association, a whole committee devoted just to trying to help out advisors who find themselves in this situation.
Mike, you want to add anything?
Yeah, and unfortunately, I mean, it's a big deal. I mean, around, April here at the SPLC is when we start getting these phone calls, and it's a very sad, disturbing time here because it has just become kind of the par for the course that come April and May, the notices start going out that you're being non-renewed or the program's being cut or somehow changed. It's something that I think that all advisors need to be aware of because it can happen fairly quickly. And one of the things that maybe we'll talk about in just a minute here is just the importance of, particularly at the college level, of really keeping track of criticisms about the media program. When the phone calls start coming in that Chris talks about, or the emails start coming in, or comments being made at student government associations about the quality of the paper. I mean, all of those things need to be kept. That is information, that's evidence that depending on where you are, but particularly like at a public college, that's all evidence that can be used to protect you. So it's just recognize this is a really big thing. There are certain things that we're going to get into about things you can do and things you ought to avoid.
Well, so why don't you take it from there? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Chris.
Oh, I was just going to say, and there is, if you have that smoking gun, we're always looking for the smoking gun. If we go in to look at a college where an advisor says, I'm being retaliated against because I was supporting my students' First Amendment rights, we say, well, give me that email where they are, where at least, if we can't prove cause and effect, at least there's a sequential thing that on Tuesday, you were told that this thing in the paper is not good, and then on Wednesday you're told we might need to shut down the paper, that's a place to start. And all I was going to jump in and say is that if things like this are addressed quickly and publicly, then there is hope. Like, we have seen administrations, just by virtue of embarrassment or sometimes just realizing that what they're doing is not actually okay. Like, they think it's okay because they're protecting the image of the school, they think. We've seen them come back and say, oh, okay, we're going to change the way we do things. That is not the majority of the time, but it does happen.
Yeah, one big suggestion I have for students, because students change. I mean, the staffs change frequently, and the institutional memory is hard to come by sometimes. It's, I tell staffs to start a First Amendment or a free speech file. It's just a manila folder that every time an email comes in, every time there's a comment made, it might not seem relevant then, but that's the sort of thing that, 3 years from now, I need to have that history of showing some sort of evidence that this is a content-based decision to get rid of an advisor or to change a program.
And that's the important thing, I mean, in terms of when we're thinking about what are the top 3 things that you tell people to do, right? Keeping records, keeping long-term records, so that it's not just what happened in this particular school year or to this particular staff, but actually that you can see it over time. To act quickly and publicly so that you can get this out there and hopefully remedy the situation really quickly. What are the other top things that you would tell people to do? I know, Mike, we have a tip sheet that works on that focuses on some of these things.
Yeah, and the first one, that's why we led with students. I mean, the number one reason, the number one tip that I have for media advisors and for students out there is it's critical that the students are the ones that take the lead in these fights. School officials, advisors and teachers, your employees, and employees sometimes have to do things that they don't want to do, or they are not allowed to do things that they would like to do. And students aren't subject to those same limitations. And so, as we heard from Olivia and Sam, I mean, getting out in front and taking the lead, taking ownership. It's a student newspaper. It's a student yearbook, whatever it is. It belongs to the students, and the students really do need to take ownership at that time, and to recognize that we have depended on our advisor to stand up for us in certain things, but now they can't, and we need to. And so having that kind of checklist like Sam and Olivia did. I mean, we kind of went through it when they were going through this, getting the press releases out there, finding out who your allies are, contacting local media, contacting groups like CMA and JEA. Those are all, really important sorts of things that students themselves can and really need to do.
That's great. Now, Chris, maybe you can talk a little bit about the First Amendment Committee at CMA and exactly what you do. And then Lori, you can talk a little bit about the Scholastic Press Committee.
Sure. If I could back up just like 1/2 second, I'm thinking we're talking about crises here, and it's important, like we need to know how to respond in a crisis. But at the college level, in a case where I work, and I'd say the high school level too, it's important. I just want to like really emphasize or support the idea that students need to be in charge of this, and they need to advocate for themselves. And moreover, though, they should be doing it before a crisis ever arises. Get into the president's office the first week of school, second week of school, and say, okay, here's what we do. We're a journalism organization. We're going to report this news, and we're very responsible, and we know the law, and all of that stuff around it, so that you at least have started dialogue already, because the problem often is just that administrators don't know what they actually do. They certainly don't know what the advisor actually does. They often think the advisor is the editor of the paper, which just is not obviously what we are. So the First Amendment Advocacy Committee, if we have an advisor who feels that she or he is being retaliated against in any way, or pressures being put on them in any way because they are defending their students' First Amendment rights, they're supporting their students the way that an advisor should, then they can give us a call. And the first thing we'll do is try to talk them through the situation to try to help them do some of what I just talked about, which is dialogue with the administration, and also get their students to dialogue with the administration. If things progress through sort of gate 1, gate 2, and gate 3, and we get to a situation where the administration is clamped down. They have, like, we had a case in 2016 where the newspaper was shut down, the editors were dismissed. It was a private school, so they said they could do whatever they wanted to do, and the administration wouldn't return our phone calls. That happens. I was chair, before I was CMA president, I was chair of that committee, and I was chairman of that committee for about 6 or 7 years, and every year there'd be at least 1, 2, or 3 times where an administrator just simply would not open conversation. In that case, 2016, CMA leveled a censure against the school, which is our strongest level of condemnation. It's essentially saying that this is a hostile work environment when it comes to the First Amendment. It's a school that's hostile to the First Amendment. And in that case, they changed things. You know, the administrator who had caused most of the problems really shut down the newspaper, for example. He was moved to a different area. They made a pledge to really protect the students' First Amendment rights, and things got back on track. That isn't usually the way it goes, but it went that way that time, and I've seen it happen a few times. And it's all about getting the public to shine a light on what's happening, because you know, people who want to restrict free speech thrive in darkness, and so we need to shine a light.
It's great.
Along the same lines, one of the items that my own students do is at the beginning of every year, just like Chris was saying, they need to go in, talk to the administrators and say, hi, I'm the new editor-in-chief of this. And that kind of helps lay that groundwork where they can begin this conversation of working together. We also invite the administration in for both Constitution Day and Media Literacy Week, where they see the kids in action. And I think the more they see that, the more they see that the students are really making the decisions. In fact, for Media Literacy Week, they were presenting a little lesson. It was, and the administration really saw that, and that passion that they have for the student voice really coming out. One of the things with the Scholastic Press Rights Committee, we have the panic button, which you can find on jea.org. And by hitting that, it could be a teacher, it could be a student. The first thing we say, obviously, is to contact SPLC to make sure that you are covered that way. And then we work with both the teacher and the students, or just the students or just the teacher sometimes, to help them fight against or have a discussion with administration. One of the items we bring up very quickly, we look at what the mission statement of the school is. And a lot of times it's educating today for tomorrow's success. And if we don't have freedom of speech, then how are we really doing that? And we bring in everything from the civic Peter Robkowski's University of Kansas research about more civic engagement as they age. As kids get older, they're more civically engaged who have been in journalism. We really also caution against self-censorship, because once people are censored or they feel like there's that retaliation against the teacher, they can want to protect and then self-censor. And so we talk about that as well. And really, I would encourage students who are experiencing this to look at their state law, contact SPLC, but also then not be hesitant to tell these stories as people are working on the New Voices legislation nationally in each state.
So do you want to talk for a second? Well, there's a lot to talk about in very little time. So we do want to talk about New Voices legislation and the fact that in many states around the country, we are there are groups that are trying to adopt legislation on a state-by-state basis to protect student press rights, and also to include anti-retaliation statutes in that legislation. Mike, you're in Washington State. Do you want to talk for just a moment about kind of the ins and outs about how New Voices relates to, or could relate to, protecting advisors?
You bet. Yeah. I mean, one of the first questions I ask if somebody's calling with a situation like this is, where are you calling from? Because if you're calling from, I should have gone through a little bit carefully, but I think there's about 6 states now that have within their New Voices or anti-Hazelwood legislation, they have the provision that also says, in addition to protecting student media rights, it also protects advisors who stand up for their students' rights, or who don't who basically allow their students to do the sort of journalism that the law allows them to do. So it makes all the difference. In California, where Olivia and Sam were, I mean, it was crazy, honestly, what the school was doing there, because it was absolutely against the law, and I think they recognized that pretty quickly. So yeah, these laws are really important, because the law is protecting, unfortunately, the law is protecting teachers and advisors and government employees are not not that very protective sometimes. I mean, they don't offer a lot of legal protection, and so we end up having to fight these battles sometimes more in the court of public opinion rather than the court of law. But things like the New Voices legislation really do just clearly put that protection in place, and it makes a world of difference.
I guess there's one kind of other, as we talk about those categories of protection, maybe there's one last issue to talk about, which is a bunch of different issues and is a huge question, which is, the posture of these cases differ state by state. They also differ situation by situation. So if you are a tenured professor versus administrative staff, if you are unionized versus not unionized, if you're in a public school versus a private school, the way that these issues are addressed and the remedies that are available on many levels, both legally and just in the public realm, differ. Do you want to take a stab at kind of thinking about or explaining how that might differ? Those are big, huge questions. And maybe the answer to that is call SPLC and we'll walk you through it. I'll preempt you on that one.
That it is, definitely call SPLC because it does vary significantly from case to case. Obviously, protections, as Chris talked about earlier, protections at private school can be pretty limited. You're not protected by the First Amendment at a private school, so most of your protections are going to be contract based, which is going to vary from private school to private school. It's always better, clearly, to be tenured rather than not to be tenured. I mean, we all know that. It certainly doesn't mean that there's not protection for non-tenured people, but it's the other thing, union help. If you have an opportunity as an advisor, you're just in a tricky situation. I mean, there's not many positions in a school that are like an advisor's position, where you are really kind of putting your neck out there. So unions have been of significant help to a lot of teachers in these situations. So if that is something that's available to you, I'd certainly, I'd look into it. It's always I hate hearing when an advisor tells me, I've had the opportunity, but I've just never joined the union. But now they need it. I mean, they really do. They need union representation. They need the union going to bat with them, talking with the principals, talking with other school officials. It can be a very good investment, I think.
So I want to say. So first of all, I want to put in a plug for a report that CMA and SPLC and the American Association of University Professors wrote about. Well, it was in 2016 in December, and it's called Threats to the Independence of Student Media. Google it. It'll come up on the University Professors page, most likely. One thing we noticed there is that there is a difference. Tenured professors are, in fact, safer, but it happens across the board. And one thing that I've seen is that a tenured professor might not lose her job, but she might be removed from the newspaper anyway. So it really is all about strategy and trying to figure out how to work with the administration or against the administration, if that's what it takes. I'm a huge advocate for Student Press Law Center. Obviously, I have my students, reach out whenever we're just at the tip of a problem. It's just so important to nip it in the bud at the beginning.
And can I just jump in, because that is one point. Chris's point is just so valuable. One of the big things I encourage advisors to do at the very beginning of the year, when things are peaceful and calm and happy, and is really to that's when you want to plug, and I'm not saying to plug the SPLC, but plug the SPLC, plug the ACLU, let your students know that, when stuff starts to happen, as an employee, I may need to back out. I mean, I might not be there in the same way that I always have. I'm not going to be the one that's going to be able to, confront the principal or call up the local media. But there are people that can help you in that process. So, when Olivia and Sam lost their advisor, I'm glad they were able to call us because I can tell them to do things that you as an advisor ought not to be telling your students to do. I can tell them, I can help you write a press release. I can help you contact local media. I can, put you in touch with local attorneys. That's not something that you as an employee ought to be doing. So have that talk at the beginning of the year. Take them to the website and just say, when you need some help, find the JEA panic button, the CMA advisors form. Do it then rather than in the heat of the moment.
And I would actually take that a step further, if it's okay. I would make it part of your media culture, not just, hey, we're going to do this. A few years ago, one of my students made this, if we are ever censored, this is what you need to do. And they know, and part of it is I can't help them. And so and that gets passed on from editor to editor. I didn't know it existed until a few years ago, but having that culture as part of it is just natural. And the advisors out there, I would encourage your students to really start that. The editors now, in order to preserve this legacy, hey, these are the things you do. And I think that would be beneficial for anyone who's even remotely going to get, chastised by administration.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Those are great ideas. There's so much here, and some of it is legal, but as you've heard, so much of it is not. A lot of it is about strategy. A lot of it is sort of exposing what's going on, documenting what's going on, again, letting students take the lead, and marshaling the resources in the community that can come together to support the advisor in ways that the advisor themselves may not be able to do. One thing that I hope is really clear to everybody who's participating in today's webinar is that there are lots of different resources. So CMA, JEA, SPLC, all have incredibly committed and very knowledgeable people who can help to advise on what to do next or what to do first. And we are available to you all the time. So we hope that you'll take it. We hope that you will never need to take advantage of our services, and that you will live in peace and harmony with your administrators, and that advisors will not be at risk. But we do know that this happens, and we know that this happens. I don't want to say more and more, but we certainly are seeing many phone calls this time of year. So if you need our help, we are here for you, and we look forward to helping you hopefully on copyright issues instead. But in the event that that there are issues around advisors at risk, we are here to support you and to work with your students to support you as well. I want to thank Olivia and Sam, Lori, Chris, Mike, for your participation in today's webinar. I do want to thank Danielle Dietrich, our stalwart journalism fellow who sets up these webinars and is the face behind the blue button at the bottom of the screen for all of her help and her leadership. There she is. Thank you, Danielle. And again, we're here at www.splc.org all the time. So if you need our help, please reach out to us. Thank you all very much. Good luck with the end of the school year, and we look forward to continuing these conversations. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you.